Hello and welcome to Strat News Global. I'm Parul Chandra, and with me today is Editor-in-Chief Nitin Gokhale and Editor Surya Gangadharan. We're going to be discussing the recent arrest and the very swift hanging of one of the killers of Bangabandhu, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The man in question is Abdul Majid. He was reportedly picked up from Dhaka, though, as our editor in chief Nitin reported, the story is otherwise. Nitin, could you share the story with our readers?
Yes, in fact, Parul, thanks for this. It's interesting that for Talking Point, we have picked up this topic for discussion because Bangladesh is India's close neighbor, and the history of these two countries, especially the recent 50-year history, is really very intertwined given the closeness of the two countries, both physically and culturally. So, to come back to the story of Captain Abdul Majid, who was hanged, the latest hanging of one of several of the killers of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he was latest in the line of those executions that Bangladesh government has carried out. Now, this man had fled Bangladesh in 1996 after Sheikh Hasina, Mujibur Rahman's daughter, became the prime minister for the first time. And then he was all over the place in Africa for some years. And then for about 20 years, apparently, he lived under various disguises, various names in and around Calcutta, in India, in West Bengal. And then, when the Bangladeshi government was looking for these killers across the globe, it was somehow reported or somehow came to the notice of the Indian and the Bangladeshi agencies, the spy agencies, in our case, the Research and Analysis Wing or RNAW, that he is living in Calcutta somewhere. So he was tracked down. And since it's an emotional issue for Sheikh Hasina personally and for many Bengalis in Bangladesh, India, as a goodwill gesture, picked him up and quietly handed him over to the Bangladesh authorities so as to show that he was arrested in Dhaka. In short, that's the story, because this is like reciprocating Hasina's gesture of handing over several Indian militant and insurgent leaders from the northeast in 2011-12. And in any case, there was some kind of wrinkle that had cropped up between India and Bangladesh because of the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was enacted recently in India, and the lack of agreement on the Tista waters sharing between India and Bangladesh. So I think this appeases her and her government, Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh, at least for the time being, and of course serves justice to the killers of Mujibur Rahman. That's the story in short, really.
Yeah, in fact, the Bangladeshi Home Minister has also just said that they do know the whereabouts of, I think, another two of Bangabandhu's killers. Surya, now you've been reading this book on on the killings and the subsequent events after that, written by Anthony Mascarenhas, a journalist. Now, could you take us through a bit of what this book is all about?
Okay. So first of all, the book,
Yes.
Legacy of Blood.
Yes.
It's no longer in print, but for those of you who can get their hands on it, this is great reading, and it's unputdownable, really. So it gives you a complete picture as to the assassination of Sheikh Mujib, the role of the army, the fact that what fascinated me was the young majors and captains with 8 to 10 years of service behind them decide that they will bump this guy off, and they have the effrontery to go and tell their superiors, brigadiers and major generals, that this is what we are planning to do. And look at the character of these guys. The senior officers, instead of dissuading them or putting them away, they say, okay, but we are not involved, and that's it. So it tells you something about the character of the Bangladesh military at that time. Whether it is that character continues, whether that strain continues, I don't know. But it's interesting to look back when you read this book and realize that how deep conspiracies can go, how they can be executed. It's rather amateurish in which they go about doing it. And the involvement of all kinds of people, from politicians to sepoys and others, and the constant interplay between these characters, neither trusting the other fully, yet wanting to do something, and all of them looking for some kind of a prize at the end, So it's amazing reading. I would recommend it for everyone.
In fact, let me come in here, Parul, a little bit because I picked up this book in Dhaka at the Dhaka airport in 2004-5, I think, when I had gone there on one of my occasional visits. And of course, I knew about Anthony Mascarenhas. For those of our viewers who don't know, he was the reporter based in Karachi, an Anglo-Indian who was in Pakistan and who had been taken on a conducted tour along with other reporters in July 1971 by the Pakistani army to show their operation against the Bengali nationalists in the run-up to the war in December 71. And he was so appalled and brutalized by the scenario that he saw, the scenes that he saw, that he smuggled his family out to London and then himself traveled through Afghanistan and Iran to reach London and write I would say, a paradigm shifting story, report, which was entitled simply Genocide in London Times, which changed the kind of outlook towards the Pakistani army in 1971 and made them the pariah of international relations and justified India's intervention in East Pakistan at that point in time. But later, and of course, he was also a good friend of Mujib from 1958-59 onwards, as he says in this book. He had tremendous access to the Bangladeshi army officers, politicians, and social leaders and businessmen in East Pakistan and then Bangladesh. So the insight that he gives is, like Surya said, is not just fascinating, but it's really brutalizing in the sense there is also this soothsayer. He's a blind soothsayer in Chittagong who tells these majors who are conspiring, guides them and says his time has come. His time has come to be bumped off, or his time has come to be killed. So all kinds of elements get mixed up. And Sheikh Mujib, who was warned incidentally by R.N. Kao, who was India's spy master, founder of RNLW, and his associates that you are under threat and you might be killed, had brushed aside that threat in August of 1975. But tragically, he was killed. Almost his entire family was killed on 15th August 1975, except for two of his daughters, Hasina and Rehana, who were in Germany, visiting West Germany that time, and therefore were saved they were saved. They didn't get killed, but rest of the family got killed. But the book apart, I think Bangladesh really went through a huge turmoil for the first 15 years of its independence. And I think even that is reflected there. But Parul, you've been covering Bangladesh for some time now. What is your sense of the shadow of that killing? Does it still persist in Bangladesh psyche or the psyche of the Bangladeshi people?
Nitin, I have been to Bangladesh, and what I sensed while I was there was that the country remains deeply divided. I think almost like 5 decades after gaining independence, you have a society or a country, its people deeply divided between those who are seen as pro-Pakistan and those who are seen as, say, pro-Bangladesh. And indeed, I think that Pakistan in some ways remains like a shadowy figure in Bangladesh's polity and events. And also, there are very deep suspicions within, I think, the Bangladesh government, especially the one led by Sheikh Hasina, on Pakistan's role in fomenting trouble within the country, especially where the Jamaati elements are concerned. They remain very active. There's growing radicalization in the country, and Sheikh Hasina has tried to check them. She in fact, banned Jamaat-e-Islami members from contesting the December 2018 polls. So her rival Sheikh Khalida Zia's party, the BNP, then fielded them. But you know, it's a past that continues to haunt Bangladesh. And talking about since we are talking about Khalida Zia and the Bangladesh National Party, which was founded by her husband Ziaur Rahman, does this book talk about his role in the carnage of 1975? Because you see, it's widely believed that he knew about it, that he aided and abetted it, and therefore this long standing rivalry between the BNP and the Awami League.
I
Surya?
think Surya has the answer to that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Surya?
Has the answer to that. Zia's role in that. I think he did mention, but he can now mention specifically.
Yeah. General Ziaur, he was the vice chief of army staff, in fact, when Bangabandhu and his family were killed.
Doesn't come out as a very personable character when you read this book, you know.
Really?
Yeah, conspirators go and, in fact, tell him that we are planning an operation, you know. He's somewhere around there, but he's not involved in that sense in the conspiracy. Although he seems to be aware of it. He was brigadier at that point, if I'm not mistaken. But he's had a meteoric rise in the army. He has a following. And he's seen as a character who, while personally honest, a lot of integrity, you know, looks out for his men. He's a guy who's out for his own thing. You know, he wants to be somebody in the country. He feels he has a goal, an ambition. You know, and he will do anything to achieve that. He's not too bothered about the way in which he goes about doing it, but he feels that he has got a God-given thing to reach there, and he will get there someday or the other. No matter what. So, in that sense, you get a sense that Ziaur Rahman is, not a. But then when you look at all these characters, they're all the same. They all see a role for themselves in politics. For some reason, they feel that they're better than the guy who's already in charge, named Mujib. Even though Ziaur Rahman may not have done very much during the war, liberation war. Apparently, he was doing some signals and all that stuff for the Mukti Bahini. So, in that sense, not really involved in a physical sense of fighting with the Pakistani army, but the constant conflict between people like him and the freedom fighters. There's this constant divide between them, which I think Parul was also referring to. It exists even today.
Yes.
I think what this book also brings out very clearly is that Mujibur Rahman's Awami League also had many characters who were opportunists, like Zia. Ziaur Rahman did not encourage the killers to go and knock them off, but he didn't dissuade them either. He didn't put them away. They were serving officers. Those who went to him saying that we are planning this, he didn't arrest them. He just ignored them or became indifferent and told his aide that this character should not come back to meet me again. That kind of thing. So he was wanting, let me say, in hindsight, that Sheikh Mujib, if something happens to him, he will have a better prospect of rising in the polity or in the army. He wanted to be the army chief. And a slight correction, Surya, about Ziaur Rahman's role in the 71 war. He was head of what is called the Z Force. I mean, they had given different names because he was Zia. They had called him the Z Force, and he was leading a certain sector at that point in time. In fact, there is also this rivalry or a kind of jealousy between the BNP and the Awami League, because Ziaur Rahman's followers and his wife and his party later claim that it was Ziaur Rahman who made the first broadcast declaring independence of Bangladesh in 1971 from Chittagong. Whereas many other books of, like say, Srinath Raghavan's 1971, the global history of the Bangladesh war, then even Anthony Mascarenhas, they all say that it was Bangabandhu who made that broadcast on 26th of March 1971 when the massacre began and when everybody was on the run and he was arrested. Just before that, he had made the broadcast. So there was this long-standing rivalry. And Awami League by itself had become like a one-party rule by 1974, 75. 72, 71 was the independence of Bangladesh. By 74, they had become like that. And these majors, young majors that Surya mentioned, actually started feeling resentful of the politicians and their cohorts because they saw some incidents and it sort of fed into their frustration. Bangladesh faced a big famine in 1974. Increasingly, corruption was seen as the bane of this country. But Awami League itself was full of people like Khondkar, Mushtaq Ahmed, who were opportunists, who were waiting in the wings for Sheikh Mujib to be killed or bumped off, and they were readily available to be occupying the prime minister's position. So it was all about conspiracies and palace intrigue and ambition, all rolled into one in those years. It continued until, as I said, until even Ziaur Rahman himself was assassinated. I think this book covers that
Yes,
also.
81.
He was assassinated in Chittagong by others. There was a Sepoy mutiny in between. And it hasn't really stopped. If you look at it, in 2009, there was this BDR mutiny, which was another jolt to Bangladesh. But Sheikh Hasina has overcome all that and has now stabilized the country, hopefully, for a long time to come.
But the question I want to ask you, Parul, is
Yes.
the army seems to have limited itself to a non-apolitical role. But is that I mean, how does it pan out, say, post Hasina? In the absence of any visible successor to her, do you see the army, in a sense, stepping into a vacuum?
That's a very difficult question to answer, Surya, but I must say something. While I was there, we had a meeting with Sheikh Hasina, and I found it quite unusual. At least it's something that doesn't happen in India, that when you meet your country's prime minister, the army chief, or some other senior officer, army officer will be around. And this was not the case when a few of us journalists met Sheikh Hasina. There was a senior army officer who was there. He sat in on our meeting with her. So clearly, they do seem to have much more say in the goings on in Bangladesh than in India, at least overtly. And yes, you're right about the fact that there is no clear successor to Sheikh Hasina. Her son is based in the US, so he's played a very, very active role in digitalizing Bangladesh. Her younger sister, Sheikh Rehana's son, who is based in Dhaka, does also play a role politically, but behind the scenes. And there are other family members who seem interested in joining politics, but really there is no clear successor to her. And I may also add one thing is that Sheikh Hasina herself is seen as becoming increasingly authoritarian.
That's in keeping in nature of South Asian politics, I think.
Yes.
If you look at around us everywhere, there are, India has faced this charge of dynastic rule. Look at Sri Lanka. We have the brothers ruling Sri Lanka. One is the president, the other is the prime minister. Pakistan has had its own share of political families and dynasties. I don't think that is something that the people are very worried about in Bangladesh. But you're right about the army's role. They're behind the scene. They're power behind the throne in a way, which is again true of every country in South Asia except India, where the army is completely under civilian control and has very marginal role in day-to-day governance in that sense. But why we are discussing this, people might ask after so many years. It's going to be 50 years of Bangladesh liberation in December 2021. But 15th August is not too far away, and almost 49 years ago, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. Two of his main killers are still absconding, although the main conspirator, the main killer, or main conspirator, the main motivator behind all this, Farooq Rahman, has been hanged previously. but the others like Major Dalin is still around, and whether he'll be extradited from wherever he is, we still don't know. But for all its all the goings on that have happened in Bangladesh, I think what fascinates me is the kind of populism that government, I mean the leaders indulge in. Indira Gandhi in India in the 70s, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in the early 70s, later people in I mean Pakistan. The wheel comes full circle in some senses that assassinations have followed democratic elections. Pakistan and Bangladesh, they may hate each other, they may not like each other, but in many cases there are a lot of similar histories in terms of democratic journey of these two countries in that sense. So therefore, it's always good to discuss all this. But Parul, you tell us what does Bangladesh look like? It's one of the fastest growing countries in South Asia, if not
Yes,
elsewhere.
yes, they're doing pretty well economically. Their development indices have improved tremendously, and they're doing very well on that front. Though, of course, now they like many other countries across the world are hit badly by the coronavirus pandemic, and their numbers are spiking. They seem to be in control, but now there is some cause for concern. But really a lot will depend on how Sheikh Hasina is able to deal with this pandemic, and it will be a test of her abilities as a person who's led her country for so long now.
That's right. So I think on that note, we should stop the discussion here. But always, don't forget to like us on our social media handles and keep sending the feedback. You are on Talking Point, and this time, unusually, the Talking Point is between the colleagues here on Strat News Global. Normally, we do have a guest on our program, but this time we decided that since all three of us have some interest or the other in Bangladesh's history and this book that was being read by a couple of us after this killing or the execution of Captain Majed, we thought we will do this discussion. So thank you very much for watching, and do keep coming back to Strat News Global. This is Nitin Gokhale along with my colleagues Surya Gangadharan and Parul Chandra on Talking Point.